Welcome to the RC Roundtable Podcast, where we discuss the latest RC hobby news, events, model reviews, and a whole lot more.
Hey everybody, it's Terry. I'm going to do an episode of RC Rescue here, and there's going to be a couple of unique things about this particular episode. First of all, you can see that I'm by myself. It's not that I do not enjoy the company of Lee and Fitz, but they're not available right now, and I wanted to get this knocked out, so I'm going to try this one solo. And another unique thing about this episode is that rather than talking about something that I bought from a swap meet or out of someone's basement off Facebook Marketplace, we're going to be talking about an airplane that I've had and have flown for a while, but crashed. And I need to get it fixed up and back in the air. And the model that I'm talking about is this. It is a ParkZone Artizan. And I bought this probably a year and a half ago. And to be honest, I wasn't particularly interested in this model, but it was part of a lot of other models that had some stuff I was interested in. And since I bought the whole lot, this came with it. And since I had it in front of me, I decided to go ahead and try it. And I ended up really liking it. And it became a model that I took to the field just about every time I went flying. Now, there's nothing particularly great about this Artizan, but it's a good all-arounder. It does a lot of things well. It was fun to fly aerobatics with. It does really great knife edges. You could fly it in wind. It uses simple 3-cell 2200 milliamp hour packs. So it was just a good, fun airplane that I could fly just about in any condition, anytime. And I was flying it at the field a couple weeks ago, and everything looked great. I did my usual pre-flight checks, and then I took off and went straight into a hammerhead. Everything was still going great. And then on the way down, I didn't have control anymore, and I started to freak out. But before I hit the ground, I got control back and was able to level out, and I was trying to bring it in for a quick landing. But before I could get it back on the ground, I lost control again, and it went in a slight roll and hit wingtip first. I guess it hit this side first. So yeah, I think it hit the left wing first. So I want to get this thing repaired. And so the first part of that is to kind of figure out what the damage is from that crash. Then also, I want to try to figure out why I lost control and why it crashed in the first place. So we'll get to that at the end. I'll do the structural repairs first, and then we'll start looking at the electronics on the end. So I don't know if you can tell with the camera, but there's a little bit of wrinkling on this wing where it hit first. I don't think there's any structural damage here. That's mostly cosmetic, so I'm not really going to worry about that. Going to the tail, you can see that it's a little bit floppy here. We have a clean break on this side all the way through, and then on the left side, it's compressed a little bit, and there's some cracking here, but I think this part will be able to fix with just a little bit of CA and holding it aligned correctly. And then moving to the nose, you can see that the nose snapped off completely. It's a fairly clean break here. On this right side, it snapped right off. On the left side, it looks like it compressed fairly significantly before it broke off. So this foam is not necessarily in the same shape it was before. I'm going to have to figure out how to get that back to where it was before I can glue this piece back on. Now, I've already done a little bit of work here on the nose, because I could tell as soon as I got this thing off the ground that either the motor shaft and or the prop adapter were bent. So when I got home, I immediately took the cowling off and took the motor out, and I found out that both the motor shaft and the prop adapter were bent. And strangely, I actually had a replacement motor shaft in my stash of parts. So I've already changed out the motor shaft on here. And I shot some video of that, so I'll be sure to include how I went through that process here. But it's really pretty simple, just a matter of loosening some set screws and pulling things apart. And I've got a replacement prop adapter on order. And I do have normal prop adapters around here, but this prop adapter mates with a spinner, and so it's kind of a unique part. So I ordered that from Horizon, and that replacement should be here within a few days. That everything. So I think once I put the motor back on and get the front part of the foam back in place, we should be good to go. The servos survived fine. So I think all of the electronics did not receive any damage from the crash. So I'm just going to go kind of from the tail to the front, fixing these things, and we'll see what we end up with on the other end. So here we go. So I've taken the wings off to make this thing a little bit easier to maneuver in the shop. And we're going to look at repairing this aft end of the fuselage now. And I think I'm going to do this one side at a time. Maybe I'll start with the side on the big crack first. And my plan here is just to put some medium CA in that crack and then hit it with a little bit of kicker and hold things in alignment and hope that it dries quickly and straight. So let's give that a shot and see what happens. All right, so put a little kicker in there and see what we get. See, there's already some CA that's squeezed out, so it's not going to be a pretty repair, but as long as it holds, I'll be happy. That appears to be straight. And it's already setting, so that's good. Oh, I see the smoke coming off, so it's definitely curing. All right, we're going to call that side good, I think. Now we'll go over to the other side. And again, this side, the crack isn't as wide open, so I think there's some parts where I can get the medium CA in there, but I may have to use thin CA in some areas, just depending on how much access I have. And this sticker is kind of over the top. It didn't break. I'm going to cut that so it doesn't get in the way. Maybe peel it back a little. All right, so far that looks good. It appears to be straight, so I'll wipe off some of this extra kicker and maybe put a little bit of thin CA in the gaps down here. So I don't need to bore you with that part, so I'll take care of that now. Okay, so the back is on, and now moving to the front. Like I said, it doesn't quite line up like it's supposed to. You can see that on the right side, everything looks okay, but on the left side, things are just kind of crunched in. This foam here is a little bit accordioned. So to fix that, I'm going to try something I've never done before. People say that if you put hot water on this foam, that it'll expand back out to its original shape. So that's what I'm going to try here. We'll see if it works. I've got some very hot water I just took out of the microwave. And I'm going to pour it in this little container and try dipping the foam in there. We'll see if that does the intended trick. I'll try not to scald myself in the process. Oh, maybe it's placebo effect, but this actually looks better already. Let's see if it fits back up. All right, that's not perfect, but it's certainly better than it was. So now looking closer at this front part that broke off, it's a little bit crushed in too. So I think I'm going to do the same trick on that, and we'll see how close we can get these things to meeting up to their original dimensions. All right, let's try that again. All right, so I'm a little bit disappointed with this. It's still got a little bit of a mismatch here. So what I'm probably going to end up doing is installing the part on straight and then filling the gap with either epoxy or I'm not sure what yet. But so yeah, just stretching the foam doesn't seem to be doing the trick, but it's got us a little bit closer. So it's an improvement, but not a fix. Okay, here's what I've decided to do. I'm going to glue the front part on using medium CA. But like I said, there's going to be a little bit of a gap on the left side. So once I get it strong enough, I'll fill that gap with probably epoxy or maybe even just some spackle if it's strong enough. But what I've decided to do in addition to that is use some toothpicks here to help strengthen that joint. It's just kind of a butt joint, so I thought it needed a little something extra there. So I've got the toothpick sections sticking out there. When I add the front, it should stick into this part and make a little bit of a stronger bond. So let's try that now. I'll try not to screw it up. I'll go through and add some ticker to this, but it needs to work with this ticker to this part where I logically against the line. So I'm taking a little bit here. Okay, yeah, that gap's going to be too much for CA. I'm going to mix up a little bit of 5-minute epoxy, shove that down in the gap, and try to keep it nice looking. But I think once that's in there, this will be a nice strong joint, and we should be able to move forward. So stand by while I mix up some epoxy. All right, so I've mixed up the epoxy, and it's messy stuff, so I try to keep the mess to a minimum. So I added a little bit of masking tape on either side of that joint. That helps keep it from spreading around too much. And what I did is I kind of worked that epoxy into the joint, and then I used a scrap piece of foam to kind of squeegee it in and also to clean the outside. And the last step was I used a little bit of denatured alcohol on a rag and wiped away the excess on the outside. So right now it looks like it's fairly clean, and hopefully it'll dry that way. But we're going to leave this for a little while. Actually, let me pull the tape off. But we'll leave this to dry for, it's 5-minute epoxy, but really that's just the working time. It doesn't fully cure for, I don't know, a half hour, but I wouldn't mess with it for an hour or more. So pull the tape off, and then we'll move on to something else while it dries. So let's talk a little bit about the motor. I've already repaired the motor, but I'll talk about what I did. I think some people aren't aware that motor shafts are replaceable, and for most off-the-shelf brushless motors. Um, this is a ParkZone motor that came with this airplane, and Horizon Hobby sells replacement parts for it. So really all I had to do is I pulled this back motor mount off, and then there's what is essentially a wheel collar on the back here, and there's a set screw on there, and I pulled that set screw off, and it was a standard 1.5 millimeter hex driver to get the set screw off. And once that happened, I could pull the motor apart, kind of like pulling an Oreo apart. You pull the sides off, and then the back of the shaft comes through this plastic part where the mount is. And then if you notice up on this boss of the motor here, there's actually on this motor 2 set screws. Often there's only one, but here there's 2, and they're 90 degrees apart. So make sure you find both of those. And once I had those set screws out, I used, you can use like a mallet, or sometimes I'll use a workbench vise to work things out, but it's a friction fit of this shaft into the top part of the motor. So I worked that out and got the old shaft out. Then the new shaft in goes the opposite way, and just make sure that you put the shaft, orient the shaft correctly so that the flat spots that come from the factory are aligned with where the set screws go. So I did that. I put everything back together, used a little bit of Loctite on the set screws, and everything appears to be running correctly now. Yeah, that's really all there is to it. I'm just waiting on my prop adapter to show up. Then I can fully test it out to make sure that it's running vibration free. But if you've ever had a motor with a bent shaft, you know that it's just a nightmare. It vibrates the whole thing, and it's going to shake your airplane apart. So I would not run a motor with a bent shaft or with a bent prop adapter. Make sure you fix or replace those somehow. Let me show you here. The epoxy is dry now. I've got, you can see where the epoxy is. Where's that here? It looks fairly clean, as good as you could expect. Everything fits back into place. The motor is in place, and it appears to be centered. So things look to be aligned as they should be. And a good test here is to put the hatch back on and see if it fits into place without any big gaps. And that looks not too bad. There's a little bit of a gap here in the back, but I'm not sure what it was like before the crash. So if it's not perfect, it's close enough for me. So I'm happy with that part. And everything seems reasonably strong. So airframe repairs we're going to call done and good. And when I get the replacement prop adapter, I can get the prop and the spinner back on, and the mechanical side of this will be all wrapped up. So I've been spending some time looking at the receiver, trying to figure out why the heck the crash happened in the first place. And of course, I plug in the battery now and everything works just fine. There's no smoking gun. And this is the bind and fly version, which means it came with an AR635 receiver. And typically with these Spectrum receivers, if you have a brownout or a loss of signal, something like that, if you look at the receiver after the crash and you haven't disconnected power, the light will be flashing to let you know that something went wrong. I'm not sure I would have remembered to do that in this case, but it doesn't matter because when the nose broke off, it took the ESC with it, which of course took the power to the receiver. So the receiver was powered down and whatever indicator might have been on that receiver was instantly lost in the crash. Now, when I did plug it in, I noticed that there's 3 LED lights, red, blue, and green, and they were flashing. So I did some research on that. And apparently on this AR635 receiver, that's just an indicator that it's in sport mode. So that's not actually an issue with the crash here. So, crashes happen. It's a part of the hobby. We all do dumb things. We all make mistakes and we break airplanes. That's fine. The frustrating ones are when you don't know why the crash happened. And it appears that that's going to be the case here, that it happened and I'm not sure why, and I just got to push forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rebind the receiver to the transmitter just because I've already done some cycling just to try to work the BEC a little bit, move the servos around as much as I could to see if the BEC gets hot, maybe cuts off. Nothing happened in the first try, and I don't think that's the case because, again, this was very early in the flight and I wasn't doing anything crazy with it. So that would be unusual if that was the case as well. I'm not sure what else it could be. Maybe just a weird anomaly that day that I'll never understand. So, like I said, I'll rebind it. When I take it to the field, I'll do a range check on it, and I'll do plenty of ground testing, and I'll run the motor up and all that to see if I can cause a failure. But I'm not expecting anything to happen. So I think the best I can do is just put it back in the air and look for any indicators that there's still some kind of problem with it. So that's what I'm going to do. Well, it's been a few days and the prop adapter that I was waiting for finally arrived. So I was able to get the Artizan back together and it looks pretty good. I have to say, you have to get in close to notice that there's any damage from the crash. So yeah, it's all wrapped up repair-wise. Now I have already taken it to the field. And as I mentioned, the first thing I did when I got there was to do a range check. And that's a feature that most modern radios have. And basically it just reduces the output power from the transmitter to allow you to do a range check without walking really far away from your airplane. And on my Spectrum IX12, the range check works by holding in the bind button, and then it says to walk 30 paces away. So that's what I did, and everything checked out fine. So the next thing I did was really the only thing left that I could do, and that was to put the Artizan back into the sky. And I have to say that it flew just fine. And I did have to do a little bit of trimming, so I guess maybe the airframe components aren't precisely square to where they were before, but it's not a big deal. I was able to get it trimmed out pretty quickly, and then it flew just like I remembered. It's nice and aerobatic. It's smooth. It does really great knife edge passes. So I think it's safe to say I have my Artizan back, and I'm happy about that. So hopefully my experience fixing this airplane has given some useful tips to you for fixing a Foamy of your own. And I do appreciate you watching this episode. And also, please make sure that you check out our podcast episodes. So feel free to send us an email at contact@rcroundtable.com if you have any suggestions for new shows or comments or whatever, and we'll make sure to read them. So talk to you later. Please visit our website at rcroundtable.com. That's where you will find all of our podcast episodes. You can also find a little bit of background information about the show host and leave comments and suggestions about the show. There are links to a few of our favorite vendors and also links to our various social media accounts. Thank you for watching and listening.